Hi, my name is Shekhar. I work in the area of brand and communication strategy, and I've done so for the last 2 decades plus. I live in London, have been here for the last 14 years, and I love what I do because essentially it's having to help people make decisions that involve two to three or more good subjective choices. I mean, who wouldn't want a job like that? And if you're interested in communications or marketing or brands, you will find that that's the kind of world you live in. And in order to be successful as a strategist, those of you who are strategists or who have worked with other people, you will soon realize that one half of being really good at strategy is learning strategy the best you can, reading up everything you can, learning from your mistakes, from examples. But a crucial other half, which not enough people spend enough time thinking about or doing something about, even, is the strategist himself or herself or themselves, because you are, as I said, involved in the business of subjectivity, and therefore you'll always be faced with two or three or more choices that sound equally good. And your job is necessarily, as Rory Sutherland says, possibly to win an argument and persuade other people that X path is better than path Y or Z. And how does that come about? It doesn't just come about because you know better than anyone else. It comes about because you, as a personality, have learned your own strengths and have learned how to work with the best of yourself. And it might sound fairly theoretical at this stage, but I'll tell you my own journey and my own story, and then hopefully what I'm saying would make a little bit of sense. If you're a strategist, chances are that you're a bit introverted, and you're not the first person to speak up in a meeting, and you kind of are relatively humble compared to some other colleagues that you have. And if that's more or less your nature, or is that not your nature, you will find that there are certain places where you do better and certain places you don't do so well. So let me tell you my own story. I, along with Monica, my wife, moved here to London in 2006. Coming here was the dream. I was already working for J. Walter Thompson as a strategist in Bangalore, back in India, which is home. And I had been doing fairly well, in fact, well enough for me to kick, scream, and finally someone in London saw me and saw some potential in me and pulled me through. So I got the transfer, and in the summer of 2006 is when we moved here. And I was essentially doing more or less the same job. I was a planner back home, and I'm a planner in now my new home, which is in London. And I found that for the first 2.5 years, I found more similarities than differences. Everywhere creatives were difficult, clients were difficult, and so on and so forth. The similarities were so overwhelming that I slightly missed some of the more obvious points of what was going on in my career. Fast forward to 2.5, 3 years later, I was realizing that I was doing well enough to keep my job, but not well enough to do certain other things, such as be demonstrably in a position where I am in a leadership role, where there were critical meetings. If we had to present to a CMO, then my boss would be going on the plane along with me, sometimes instead of me. And slowly these start creeping up on you, and it crept up on me. And one day I realized that something's wrong. There is something that is missing in what is going on, and I wasn't doing well enough, and wasn't doing badly enough. And I decided to investigate that. Around the time when I found the right person, I found a lady called Elle Harrison, who has been fantastic for me. Uh, Things also started getting worse, and I started working on other businesses, and there came a point where I was actually asked off the business. And at this point, my job was in jeopardy relatively, because this client was 70% of my time, and we had a baby coming along. So it's not the best of time to feel insecure about whether you still have a job or not. And that was a bit of a wake up call, but thankfully I was already in conversations over there. And then initially, what I thought were cultural problems. I come from a very high power distance culture where you're not necessarily uh, uh, welcome to disagree with someone who's senior. God forbid that senior person is a client. And so I was comfortable and doing well in that environment where I found that I was not doing as well in this environment. And I initially thought it's cultural, but working with her, I realized that it was to do with my personality and not so much to do with my culture. I realized that I have a problem with being in power and being in a position of authority. I just cringed and I couldn't take it. I could not live with. I didn't feel comfortable asserting myself in a position of authority, taking decisions, telling people what to do, telling people what to stop doing. And no wonder slowly this was creeping up on me, where although designation wise I was in a position of power, but I wasn't really acting like that. And this became a massive problem. And she helped me realize, she took me to another side of what I do, which is a lot of teaching and training and mentoring young people or anyone who has time for me, really. And I realized that that potentially was an even more sensitive area or subject where I was utterly comfortable telling people what to do and telling people what not to do. And she kind of said, well, if you feel okay doing that, then why don't you feel okay doing this in your day job? And then I realized, well, the reason is probably because I feel quite okay that I'm doing it with the best of intentions for their benefit. And then she made me slowly transfer that mindset onto my day job. And so I adopted a mindset of, well, I'm doing it for their benefit, not because I am in a position of power and I didn't feel comfortable that people in position of power are not necessarily good, they're always bad. That was the baggage I came with, and I slowly overcame that. And the journey itself might have taken about 15 months or so. What happened before and after is quite striking, because I do not think I became that much better at planning. But in terms of my output and in terms of the impact I had for myself, for my company, and for my clients, it was exponentially better. And in the next phase of my career at JWT, roughly every 2 years, my responsibility was doubled. And then I think I found a lot of comfort in who I was, and I think the company equally reciprocated at that time, and then I grew in the company as well. So why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because it's quite critical for me to understand who that strategist is and what their strengths are and how they are able to play to their best in order to actually be good at strategy. Because as I said, you're in a subjective discipline. So one of the things, three or four things I want to tell you is, the first one is to really identify what your style is, identify your own insecurities, your own baggage, recognize them, and be okay with them and be comfortable with them. If, for example, you happen to be an introvert, you don't like conflict, you don't like harsh language, you're very sensitive to feedback, all of which are true for me, by the way, then it's important to be okay with it. And it's important to realize that when you actually tell people that these are your strength areas and these are not necessarily your strength areas, the vast majority of your clients, your colleagues will be okay with that as well. And they will help you succeed rather than do the opposite. They will understand that, you're sensitive to feedback, or you're not necessarily someone who likes very, very conflicting language, and they will work with you and help you do your best. So it invariably works to your advantage to open up about your vulnerability or your insecurity, and actually it helps other people too. The other thing that I found is that, wherever you're lacking in a certain skill, let's say you're lacking a skill in promoting or bigging up what you've done, find a partner and be quite open with them and tell them that, this is the kind of gap that you're filling for me. Find that person or find that team and see how you and that team complement each other, and be, as I said, be open about why they're there, what they're adding for you and what you're adding for them. And you'll find that life opens up, and where you're able to play to win rather than just win an argument, with complementary teams with other skills that are personality led skills and not just strategy led skills. The other small thing I find is to try and have a response to everything. As Hagrid says in Harry Potter, of course, his references towards slugs, but it works in marketing, better out than in. Have a response to everything. And that has tended to help me a lot. So, the in sum, what I want to say is that this has been a really powerful journey for me, where I discovered that getting to know who you are and how you work well and how you can bring out the best in yourself, and being open about it and telling other people, actually impacts not just you, but you make the world around you and hopefully the world itself a better place, because you brought out the best in yourself. So I hope that helps, and good luck with your career in marketing or strategy or wherever it is. I wish you all the best, but remember to be kind to yourself and be quite open about your vulnerabilities, and the world will be a much better place for it. Thank you. Bye bye.